All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, China Crypto, FUD versus Fact. I'm your host, Lou Kerner with Blockchain Co-Investors. We're a crypto fund-to-fund, and I'll be co-hosting today's show with my partner at Quantum Economics, our founder and CEO, Maddie Greenspan. Welcome, Maddie.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Where are you calling in from?
From Ariel, Israel.
Very cool. And when are you heading to Miami?
I'll be landing on Thursday morning.
A truly international event. And so the genesis of this call is with the May 18th Reuters article alleging that China is prohibiting financial institutions and payment providers from dealing with cryptocurrencies. What's more, the article said that China is advising investors against speculative crypto trading. Practically speaking, the news makes it clear, according to Reuters at least, that institutions like banks can't offer cryptocurrency services to their clients. Nevertheless, while Reuters portrayed this as breaking news, was it really breaking news? And so to answer that question and provide additional insight into crypto China, we've got three great speakers today, all expert on China's crypto ecosystem, starting with Alex Thorne, head of firm-wide research at Galaxy Digital. Welcome, Alex.
Thanks, Lou. Happy to be here.
Cool. And when are you arriving in Miami?
I arrive tomorrow at 2:29 p.m. And I'm excited, very excited. Should be fun.
Cool. And I'm looking forward to hanging out. Alex will be joined by Otc Crackdown, managing partner at Dragonfly. Hey, Otc.
Thanks for having me, Lou.
And are you going to be in Miami?
I am not going to be in Miami, actually.
You feel like you're missing out?
A little bit. Well, I haven't gotten my second shot yet, and I get the sense that Miami is going to be a bit of a petri dish. So I'm holding off for now.
Yeah, it's probably not a bad idea. And then we have our final speaker, Omar Ozden with Rocktree Capital.
Lou, Maddie, great to be here.
Cool. And when are you arriving in Miami?
I haven't scheduled it yet. Just so many things to do, but probably tomorrow.
Okay, cool.
Looking forward to it.
So we're going to start with Omar and then have Alex. They've got some prepared remarks. They'll be talking for somewhere around 8 to 10 minutes. And then after that, we'll have a little bit of a dialogue between the five of us. And then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. And so if you're in the audience and you've got some questions that you'd like to ask the panelists, please use the Q&A function on Zoom. And if we pick your question, we'll let you know, and we'll bring you up on stage, open up your video and audio, and you can join us up here on stage. And so with that, I'd like to hand it over to Omar. So Omar, you can grab the screen.
Great. Hold on. It says I can't. You want to show?
Yeah, that's right. You left, so I've got to make you. Okay, there you go.
Okay, great. Let's see here.
All right, there you go.
Okay, sorry, just backing up a little bit. So hello, everybody. I'm Omar Ozden of Rocktree Capital, and we're here to talk about what's happening in China, a little bit of background on us. We're in Beijing, Shanghai, New York, and Toronto. We help accelerate our projects in Greater China. We come in early stage investments. 75% of what we do is blockchain, 25% new economy. So for example, we were the founding investor in China's version of WeWork, which we helped grow to 200 locations, primarily in China, internationally, and on the blockchain side. Huobi is our investor, Gen Fund is our investor, and we typically take either Chinese projects and make them international, or help like really strong international projects and accelerate them in China. So, Chinification of the blockchain project, localization, marketing, bringing in the institutional retail investors, developers, partnerships, all the way to exchange listings. So one example of something we did was Casper Labs. We came in as founding investor in 2018. We became the China arm for Casper. We designed the actual market acceleration plan with conferences, investors, multi-year PR marketing. And I want to just highlight something in China, for example, and this is really relevant. In September 4th, 2017, there was sort of the ban of crypto or ban of ICOs. But the reality is, as long as you knew how to properly navigate it and not cross the red line, which is a key component in China, you could still have certain activities. And so we had to be careful not to do things towards retail and so forth. And when we had meetups for our projects, we would have them in locations that were private, that were more underground, depending on the city and so forth. And that's what we would do. But on the institutional side, there's big investors in China, and 30% of Casper's institutional investors are from China. We help with that. And China's the biggest crypto market in the world. And so every project has to be a part of it, but you have to be cognizant of the key points there. You can't cross the red line.
And Homer, what do you mean by what is the red line? How's that defined?
There's so many things. And actually, I'm a securities attorney by background, and I've been in China for 30 years myself, speak Mandarin. It's really, a lot of times it's not in black and white. It's not a fine line rule, it's a feeling, and you just have to understand it. So for example, I was originally went to mainland China in the 90s, and we helped develop the internet. Internet was illegal, and foreign investment in internet was illegal, but it was still happening. And you just had to, we designed a structure called the VIE structure that we worked with the government, and eventually it became legal. That's the way things happen in China. And so there's crypto, it's still practically a nascent technology. And in China, it's very practical in terms of their approach, but there's some things you can't do. For example, you cannot have retail people lose a ton of money. If that happens, if you do something like that, or fraud or anything like that, you're going to be in big trouble. That's absolutely not allowed. And so you can't do that. You can't deal with politically sensitive people, anything like that, obviously.
I know you mentioned Casper. I'm an advisor to Casper as well. And I know that you did an AMA in China. How are you able to do that? That was, I guess, closed as well when you do something like that?
Yeah, so that particular, when we did multiple AMAs and with the CEO all throughout 2020. And I think a part of it also was just knowing the temperature of China. So I'm gonna talk about Casper. I'm gonna also talk about Dragonfly as well. Something that we would do is we would do things, as I mentioned, the meetups were underground. But around September, October of 2019, all of a sudden Dragonfly came out. Haseeb, you might remember this, where in Beijing, we had in the room Vitalik and Arthur, and we were all there. And I was just astounded that it was in the center of Beijing, right near our office. And we were openly talking about crypto. And I didn't understand how that occurred, but Feng Bo, who is the founder of Dragonfly, I know his brother. I set up his first fund 21 years ago. He's very well politically connected. They managed to pull that off when before you could never do that in Beijing. And then a month later, Xi Jinping came out with his speech that said China is going to be the leader in blockchain. So that you had to have a real sense of what the temperature was, that the Chinese government was publicly going to embrace blockchain and support it. And so that was coming down the pipe, and I only understood it at that point. So it's a feeling. It's a feeling at every level: government, market, legal, provincial, everything. So I can't say, it's going to be written down. And that's something that's different between, let's say, the United States or a common law jurisdiction in China.
And so, with the few minutes you have left in the formal comments, how are you putting, this moment into that context?
So I'll get into it in terms of, some of the things that we see. These are some of the projects that we've done. So I mentioned that China bans ICOs September 4th, President Xi Jinping's speech, October 25th, 2019. You see, we had the Libra hearings just before that, Bitcoin dropped. Next day, President Xi Jinping gives a speech, Bitcoin jumps up in price. So the mood was good at that time. And we knew at that time we could actually do more things in China because the government was supporting it. What we see right now is mining. Okay, that's one of the focuses of the Chinese government. So Inner Mongolia, Xinjiang, and Sichuan province particularly. There's three concerns right now. Environmental, and that's an international concern. Bitcoin uses a lot of power, and in provinces like Inner Mongolia, it's coal. Xinjiang is partially fossil fuel and renewable. Sichuan is mostly renewable. So that's an issue. Energy is the other issue. Like NDRC from our sources in China has come down and said very, very recently that Bitcoin mining and mining in general is taking up too much energy from China, and this is a massive problem. And the third one is a lot of institutional investors, like publicly listed companies in China, have now, they want to get into crypto, but they can't officially buy it. So they've invested lots of money into mining operations. So they're removed from it. So all these three things are major considerations. Sichuan government's going to meet June 2nd to talk about it. Xinjiang government's going to meet within this week to talk about it because you have what the federal state level government's saying. We can expect something from the state level government, which are the feds, sometime after July 1st, 2021, talking specifically about mining and some other aspects of blockchain. July 1 is the 100th anniversary of the Communist Party, so nothing's going to happen before then, expected after. Also, there's just generally in China, and I mentioned this earlier, we saw that with internet and other things. The NDRC is the National Planning Commission, which has a huge amount of power in China, and they are really concerned about energy consumption. But you know what? The local authorities, the provincial authorities have a big stake in mining. It creates jobs, it's money. So can they figure out a way to have some sort of distinction between fossil fuels and clean energy? That's yet to be seen. Another thing that's a major impact is exchanges, primarily through two things. One is mining and OTC. Actually, as my next slide shows, there's been a crackdown on OTC since the beginning of 2020. So to answer your question, Lou, this is old news. A lot of what's happening with the OTC is old news, but now the platforms like Huobi, OKX, Mocha, and so forth that have big OTC platforms, it looks like they're going to have to close them down, and they have done that. And it's possible. We saw early 2020 and throughout 2020, we saw arrests at the individual level for OTC traders, which were, on the wrong side of money laundering or dealing with politically sensitive people and so forth. And we'll probably see some more arrests coming up. It's just things that you can't do in China. Another thing that we're seeing is now the major exchanges are no longer onboarding domestic customers for derivatives. And so we got to watch that. That's happening right now. And let's see what's going to happen with domestic altcoins too. There could be an issue with that, but that's coming in the future. So what does this mean for the Bitcoin price? If people in China have less access to derivatives, they might actually start putting more money into Bitcoin and just going along with it. What's coming for future regulation? So this is not, I wouldn't say this is a fact, but my understanding is that there's potentially 5 authorities that may be talking about putting pen to paper and coming up with some regulations. You know, I already mentioned this OTC crackdown in 2020. It was, you know, at the individual OTC level, but now the crackdown has started to focus on the major platforms like the exchanges and so forth. But we think that the individual OTC providers, as long as they don't commit fraud or money laundering, anything like that, I think they'll be okay. You know, just to sort of wrap up the comments, China's complex and opaque. You know, when we worked with Casper Labs to navigate it through China, like you really need to localize and you need to obey their local rules. It's really important. But you know what you hear in the West and what you hear in the Western media, a lot of the times it's not correct. It's not the full story because it captures one part of it, but not the entire landscape. And you know, remember there's two separate internets now, like a Western and a Chinese, and there's two different styles of governing, and there's different types of doing business. And so to understand what's going on in China from San Francisco, New York, or Tokyo, just like it's not possible, to tell you the truth. You have to be grassroots. And so, you know, what we see generally is that, yes, there's more restrictions coming. Yes, bad actors will have difficulties, and there's certain red lines now, policy. I mentioned environmental, energy, money laundering, conversion of currency. All of those things are key policy factors at the highest level of China. But China is very pragmatic. It loves tech, and the people love profit as well. And so, you know, back in the 90s, late 90s and 2000s, I was a part of the group that, you know, we developed the VIE structure to allow companies like Baidu, Alibaba, NetEase to actually take foreign investment. And like we helped open the internet, even though these things were illegal at the time, or like policy was banned. But China became one of the biggest internet markets in the world, if not the biggest in mobile internet. And that all occurred over time, and it required a collaborative approach, both domestic and some foreign. And today, Rocktree, myself, you know, a lot of colleagues are helping do the same thing for crypto.
That's great. So thanks a lot, Omar, for those comments, and thanks for sticking around for the Q&A. So we're going to have lots of those from the audience. And next, we're going to hear from Alex. So Alex, you want to grab the screen share?
Yeah, absolutely. That was great, Omar. And I think it's going to dovetail well into what I'm going to talk about, because I'm going to focus a bit more specifically on Bitcoin mining in China following sort of the recent announcement actually on May 21st. But first, just briefly, I'm Alex Thorne. I'm the head of research at Galaxy Digital. We're a diversified financial services company operating in the crypto ecosystem. We have an investment banking team. I'm trying to get rid of this little thingy here. I don't know if it's going to go away. We have an investment banking team that advises on M&A. We have a big trading operation, OTC, principal trading, market making. We manage funds, so we have an asset management business. We do a lot of venture style investments off our balance sheet. We call it principal investing across the ecosystem. And we have a large Bitcoin mining business, both mining Bitcoin on a proprietary basis and also providing financial services to Bitcoin miners. So I want to talk specifically about this notice from the FSDC that was published on May 21st, which was a Friday night at 10 p.m. Beijing time. And this was for background, I think of this committee as sort of like FSOC in the United States. It's a multi-regulatory interagency committee headed by, in China, chaired by the vice premier, but also includes the governor of the People's Bank of China, and several other top regulators. And this notice wasn't specific to crypto, but in the second piece, which was about controlling financial risk, and I've highlighted here in red, right? One of the sort of things that the committee is focused on, they said, was cracking down. This is a Google Translate, so we confirmed the veracity of it, but I don't have a full, professional translation, but crack down on Bitcoin mining and trading behavior was included. And, this isn't, as Omer mentioned, he pointed out the banning of ICOs in September 2017. That's this BBC BBC headline here, sort of in the middle of the screen. This isn't the first sort of these Bitcoin bans and crypto bans in China. We all know that. But we talked to a lot of Bitcoin miners in particular, and also trading companies and OTC desks. But I think Omer covered that well. And so I'm going to focus on the Bitcoin mining. They're taking it very seriously, and part of that is the growing sort of energy usage concerns, which are both environmental and sort of just on the usage of energy, but also purely the high level nature of the announcement. Prior of these announcements didn't come from state council level committees with membership like the FSDC, and so I'll talk about a little bit in a minute what we saw and what we're hearing from mining partners and people we talked to on the ground there. But really, we saw a range of reactions that immediately started with significant fear on that Friday night. So this was published as, our friends were out getting dinner, grabbing a drink, getting ready to go to bed. And over that first weekend, and Bitcoin's price tumbled over the weekend as this news was sort of digested, we saw a lot of fear, and we saw reactions ranging from, accelerating a planned migration. I'll talk about how Chinese Bitcoin miners are very migratory, moving from typically, coal-powered regions to the wetter regions like Sichuan during the rainy season, accelerating those migrations all the way ranging to full capitulation. I mean, we were seeing huge numbers of Bitcoin mining machines become available or being offered on secondary markets. So I do think some of that fear has receded, but as Omer pointed out, the upcoming meetings in Xinjiang and Sichuan, which are being billed as, community sort of meetings. Let's talk about what a ban might mean for our region, sort of as open forums. Some of the fear has receded, but people are really taking this quite seriously. Just back up a little bit, show you one thing we were looking at. You've got the Bitcoin price in orange back to July 2020. This is based on Coinmetrics data, and what we saw was significant miner selling of Bitcoin also during and around this announcement and shortly thereafter. That's, we've got the blue, which is flows that Coinmetrics has attributed to going to exchanges, but even sort of, knowing how the ecosystem works in China, a lot of they don't have great attribution on which addresses belong to exchanges. So we also look at flows out of miner addresses generally. And we saw a huge uptick in that, which has, since receded. Again, these are outflows. This isn't net flows. This is outflow numbers. I think just worth pointing out. And we talked to a lot of folks too who were really, really worried right when this was announced. Just for context, I like this chart because one of the things that's been said a lot was by Elon Musk was that a big factory shut down. And this was sort of the second to last circle here. A couple of weeks ago, he was like, "Oh, one factory shut down and Bitcoin's hash rate plummeted." And it's true, there was a decline. It was the 7th largest decline a couple of weeks ago, but we just actually had a decline in Bitcoin mining difficulty, which is derived by the time between blocks, and which is part of sort of a calculation that's a function of hash rate. Just 2 days ago was the 3rd largest percentage drop in Bitcoin mining difficulty. And people have already been saying, they were saying 10 days ago, they've been saying that, oh, we're going to see hash rate really dry up in China because of this. Everyone's freaking out. The reality is actually a little different. We are seeing, like I said, some minor capitulation and people trying to move machines outside the country. But actually, this was expected. This has been expected. Every May and June and every October and November, we see big drops in hash rate as miners unplug. They literally are nomadic. They unplug hundreds of thousands of machines and move them to where electricity is cheaper. We segmented Bitcoin's hash rate by the Sichuanese rainy or dry season here, which is just sort of a helpful thing. And you can see at the beginning and end of each of these change periods, there are big drops. So I just, when I go back to this chart, I wanted to point out that there's going to be narratives said that when they see hash rate go down, oh, it must be miners are totally done in China, even though we are seeing some fear and some miners trying to get out of the business. We're not seeing it in mass. And frankly, actually, in the last week or so, we've even had folks who were putting on offer machines to sell in the secondary market say, well, actually, would you buy them for us, but host them in China? And we were like, well, that doesn't seem to, jive with the idea that they think a huge crackdown is coming, but we are we are likely to see more restrictions, and particularly in some regions. We know Inner Mongolia is appears to be acting much more harshly than perhaps some of the other regions. So just wanted to put some of that in context, and then a little more context here. This is a bit stale, but this was Cambridge Center for Alternative Finance's estimate for how much hash rate is in China. And this is based on surveying miners. You know, commonly the criticism of Bitcoin's mining hash rate is often people looking at the amount of hash rate associated with pools that are known to be managed or owned in China. This is actually based on a survey of miners themselves, but you can see it's an outsized proportion. And for Bitcoin, this wouldn't be good no matter what that country was, to be clear, right? We want Bitcoin's network at all levels to be more and more distributed.
And Alex, you said this is a year old, and I know this is kind of the latest data that's kind of out there. Do you have any sense for over the last year whether that number has gone up or not, or stayed flat?
I think it's come down a little bit. We've seen a significant growth in North American hash rate. We're going to see a much bigger growth over the next year and a half, but it's still significant. I mean, I like to use this. We could use data from the pools and say, okay, Ant Pool or via BTC, these are likely mostly Chinese miners, but we know that those pool hash rates represent an upper bound because there are plenty of miners from outside China that mine into those pools also. So I go with this one because it's an actual survey. But yeah, I think it's probably slightly less, but it's still dramatically more than all other, and almost certainly more than 50% of Bitcoin's total hash rate. And just so some closing points here, this is interesting data. So we've been tracking the publicly traded Bitcoin miners. So, you know, companies like Marathon and Riot Blockchain and other companies, mostly in North America, who have announced big purchases of Bitcoin mining machines and sort of what their scheduled delivery dates are. And we see approximately 60 exahashes about to come online over the next year and a half in North American mining facilities at today's hash rate, which of course it probably won't be when that happens, but that's almost 45% of the network. So a huge amount. And that's at about 140 exahashes today, which is we're measuring the amount of hash rate that exists. So we already see expansion outside of China, which is good. It's possible, like I said, that if we do, and we think we will see significant additional supply come online as some miners decide to either leave the country, Chinese miners decide to leave the country or even sell their machines, that could really upend what has been a very supply constrained Bitcoin mining machine market over the last year and a half or so, and bring a lot more supply. And we think some of that will land in North America. I should caution, we also think plenty will land in Kazakhstan and Russia and even Pakistan, perhaps, countries sort of neighboring China. But, you know, I think that it could even be higher than what we expect, the North American migration. And I'll just close here. I want to say why we think this could be good for Bitcoin overall. I mean, we want to see all levels of the network more decentralized. Like I said, it's not picking on China here. We don't want 60% of the hash rate in North America either. We want Bitcoin to be highly distributed. The nodes are already highly distributed. And one good thing is we know that Bitcoin miners don't control Bitcoin, which is frankly unlike most other networks. No other network that I'm aware of, blockchain network, have nodes, non-mining nodes, asserted authority and sort of had a Marbury versus Madison event like they did during the SegWit 2x scaling wars in 2017, like Bitcoin has. So nodes have established they have significant power, and they're highly decentralized on Bitcoin. But we'd like to see hash rate more decentralized also. We don't know where it will go. And, you know, I just throw this in here at the end. We don't think there's any kind of significant risk in the near term to Bitcoin. We don't think that all that 65% of hash rate is going to turn off all at once. If it did, however, that would be, you know, problematic for Bitcoin in the near term, right? We'd see a massive difficulty. We could have a very high difficulty with a very low hash rate, which could make blocks take a really long time. And but we're not seeing that. And you know, Bitcoin lowered its difficulty a couple of days ago, like I pointed out, with no problems, and continues to produce blocks. So long term, I think it's bullish if we get just more decentralization. But miners are taking this seriously, and that's a huge business in China, and it's a huge global business. So, and it's part of our business, so we follow it closely.
Okay, terrific. Thanks a lot, Alex. It was a lot of good data there, and thanks for sticking around. And so, Hasib, I know that that you have a viewpoint here, and so I'd love to hear that. And also, why don't you start off, telling us a little bit about your background in Dragonfly?
Absolutely. So my background, so I'm a managing partner at Dragonfly Capital, which is a global crypto venture fund. We have people on the ground in China who are, leading investments there and also monitoring the situation on the ground. I'm based in San Francisco, and we have a lot of investments both in the West and in the East, so to speak. So we obviously are very close to a lot of the phenomena that's going on the ground. My take, I think, would be slightly different than what Omer and Alex have pointed out. I think they described very well the situation that's currently going on in China. But the question is kind of two things: where is this going, and what's the net consequences? I suspect that. So the first thing that is kind of hard to really fully understand where this is going is that it's pretty clear that this bull run has woken up the Leviathan in China. And for a while, they were basically sleeping on what's been going on over the last 2 years, since the DeFi bull run. The other thing that the other thing that happened in China was that a bunch of DeFi protocols got blocked by the Great Firewall, which also had not happened through the entirety of 2020 when these protocols first started taking off. So it's clear now that the government is paying attention to these things, and there's more to come. I don't think we're done yet. It's plausible that the story ends with, okay, it's really about mining and really about energy consumption. But the second part of Liuhe's comments, which were about speculation, largely goes kind of unheeded or just as a subtle comment that gets interpreted in various ways by local lawmakers. That's possible. That's the way this ends up. But I'd be surprised if that's the net consequence. The exchanges, there hasn't been a clear directive to the exchanges in China. Right now, they're kind of trying to figure out exactly what they want us to do, which is why there's this perceived, okay, maybe we need to shut down OTC, maybe we shut down leveraged products for Chinese retail, and as was mentioned earlier, it's likely this is going to result in one. Well, I suspect instead of being people buying Bitcoin, it's going to be people buying altcoins because they want volatility. People don't want to be investing in only non-volatile assets, which right now Bitcoin is relatively low volatility compared to everything else you can buy on the market. And then, so one, I think it means a rotation to alts within China, but two, it obviously means that it's a boon for the Binances of the world or the Bybits of the world that are outside of China that can continue to potentially serve some of the retail within China with people. Everybody in China who uses crypto knows how to VPN. It's just it's part of the game. So I think you're going to see the non-China platforms that can serve Chinese retail, whether they should be doing that or not, they're going to end up winning in the longer term. The question of what happens to hash rate in China, I agree, is kind of epiphenomenal. It doesn't really matter that much if some of the hash rate moves from here to over there. Hash rate just kind of does its job, and the market sort of figures itself out. The bigger issue, to my mind, is that if you see a crackdown on both OTC and you see a crackdown on mining in China, and both, if you imagine both those crackdowns are severe, then what that could result in is basically stranding Chinese money from the crypto economy. Because the two primary ways that Chinese money, because if you think about the gateway between the RMB and crypto, the two primary ways that it happens today is either one, through OTC, or two, through investing into mining. Those are the two thickest channels between the RMB and Bitcoin / the rest of crypto. If those two things are shut off, that's a huge amount of demand that is now isolated from crypto. And I think this is the real thing that is worth being afraid of. And I think the real reason why you saw markets vomiting when this news came out, not the first one about the banking thing, which I agree was kind of bullshit. The bigger issue was the mining ban and the comments from Liuhe, which I think you should be afraid of that. If that happens, then that's a big part of the market that no longer has access to participating in the upside of crypto.
Okay, interesting. And you didn't, and I don't think any of the speakers kind of talked about putting the comments in the context of what the government has been doing kind of broadly against the, with the finance sector over the last, 6-9 months, I think, to some degree, starting with what they did with Alibaba and the Ant IPO. So do you see this as this, do you think this is really a something that's specific to Bitcoin that the government is focused on, or is this more, at least on the banking part, a broader part of their kind of focus on finance?
Omer, you want to take that?
I just think, first of all, renminbi is not a convertible currency. There's a limitation at the individual level for $50,000 US per year of conversion. That actually, a lot of individuals have been restricted even from that. So definitely what you said, there's a tightening of allowing for people to take currency out of the country, and USDT and some other ways have been used for this. So absolutely, like, that is a concern, and that can be sort of placed in that money laundering compartment. So yes, definitely. But just, like, one thing that I can say, after decades of being in China, like, Chinese are very intelligent, and when they're focused, like, they'll figure out different ways, and government will then have to catch up and figure out a new way. It's work with VPNs and so forth, and we've seen that in many ways. So this is an ongoing story.
Undoubtedly. And before we turn it over to the questions from the audience, and again, if you've got questions, put in the Q&A. We have a couple lined up, but we'll hopefully have time for a few more than that. Let me just ask each one of you, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not a concern at all, and 10 being very, very concerned. How or impactful? How impactful do you think that this is going to be for Bitcoin? Both let's say in the near term, in the next month, and then looking out in the longer term over the next year. And Haseeb, start with you.
That's a tough question. Depends on what you mean by this. If this is what's actually literally happened, which is that you can't do coal mining, and Chinese retail can't buy derivatives in China, that's not a big deal. None of that is going to make a difference in anything. It's more, I think, what I'm more concerned about is whether it's a sign of what's to come, which is increasing government attention to the sector, which, generally speaking, in China, the more attention you're getting from the government, it's not a pleasant thing. You'd rather them not paying attention to you. So I would say that the current status quo, I'd say, is like a 2 on the concern scale. Longer term, the broader phenomenon of getting more attention and potentially this kind of wanting to clamp down on speculation, I would say that's like a 7 or an 8.
Okay, thanks, Haseeb. Alex?
Yeah, I think it is concerning. I think it's maybe the most concerning that it's yet been. I don't think it's existential for crypto in any way, or even Bitcoin mining. But so, if I have to put numbers, maybe I'll say, in the near term, we'll call it a 4 or 5, or maybe a 6, and in the longer term, a 2 or 3.
Okay, it's different than Haseeb and Omer.
I think in the long term, I echo Alex's comments. Like, this is good for Bitcoin. It's going to be more decentralized, and you want that. Like, you can't have 65 to 70% of the miners inside China. You want it, like, it can't be any centralized location. So it's generally good. In the near term, we are going to get more attention from Chinese government, US government. Guess what? Now you just captured at least 70% of the crypto world in terms of liquidity and so forth. And so that's coming. But you know what? That's like, that happened in 2017 and 18 too. And like, things kept going, and we'll have ebbs and flows, and we have DeFi, which is a real thing as well. And that's more difficult to regulate because if it is truly decentralized. So, if you're in it, let me make this one last point. The amazing thing about September 4th, the ban of ICOs, is the crypto markets totally tanked. But then the government in China gave 1 month for people to like adhere to the policy. Then all the guys who weren't real crypto, they left the market, and the real guys stayed, and then they all went in full in, and the crypto market just accelerated and zoomed up after that. So like sometimes this is good to thin out the herd, who's real and who's not, and we're gonna know after this. It's a good thing.
Thinning out the herd. I guess never a bad thing.
So I'd like to say, as the old meme goes, this is good for Bitcoin. I mean, I don't see anybody in China using Bitcoin less because of this. As he mentioned, less leverage. That sounds like a good thing to me. Alex mentioned the decentralization of Bitcoin's hash rate. That seems like a good thing to me. So really, I mean, in the short term, certainly we got a few miners selling and the FUD, which was joined with Elon, but I've been worried for quite a while about Bitcoin's energy consumption, and I'm glad that we're kind of getting that out of the way and people are starting to address that. I think that that's generally a positive thing, as Bitcoin is anti-fragile. So whatever doesn't kill you actually makes you stronger. Lou mentioned, the Alibaba Saga, and that just kind of really explains how things work in China, which is that Jack Ma, the CEO of Alibaba, stepped over a line, and Alec, I think it was Omer who mentioned the red line. Actually, it's not really a red line; it's a really gray, opaque line. They give kind of general guidance, and you don't know you've crossed it until they put you in a car and disappear you. Jack Ma was disappeared for some 80 or 90 days. We had Matt Case actually counting them every single day on Twitter. Where's Jack Ma? Has anybody seen Jack Ma? And that's just kind of how things work. As long as I think people stay within the parameters, I think China has to kind of come out and be that's kind of environmentally friendly. Certainly they're worried about capital flight. And one thing that nobody mentioned here is the digital yuan, which is in direct competition with Bitcoin in many ways. So they've got to also keep a clamp down on that.
Yeah, I think in some ways it can be very complementary to each other. And certainly in the long run, the more people who have digital wallets, I think the better that is for Bitcoin. But we'll take our first question from Jason Dean. Jason?
Hey guys, I should just warn you, my internet's a little bit iffy today, so hopefully I'll get through the whole thing. I mean, I had a couple of questions really. I mean, I'm a miner myself, but I'm based in Siberia, so obviously I keep a close eye on what's going on around the world. And of course, the difficulty adjustment recently has been quite welcome as a miner, because obviously that does contribute directly to profitability. But I mean, I've got several really. I'm going to try and just stick to one, I suppose, because Lou will tell me off otherwise. What do you think the end game is here for China? Okay, because there's lots of different ways we could go. They're definitely making this difficult at the very least. And there's several routes we've talked about we could come out of here. But what do you think is really behind this? Where they're going to try and pitch themselves in the next sort of 5 to 10 years with Bitcoin, particularly if we see the rest of the world really expanding with it and China sort of contracting with it?
Okay, Haseeb, you want to take a crack?
I mean, my suspicion, I'd say the base case is that just a widespread ban on coal mining for Bitcoin, and then more, for basically province-specific regulations of, oh, hey, you guys are pulling too much off the power grid. This is knock it off. We can decide you need to get a license or something. I don't know. So some way in which you can kind of avoid the noisy neighbor effects of having a Bitcoin miner in your neighborhood. But for the most part, I think the local governors are very mindful that Bitcoin mining is a good business, and obviously right now it's incredibly profitable given the huge chip shortage and the rise in Bitcoin over the last year. So I would suspect in the short term, I don't think you're going to see that much radical change, other than, again, some of the miners who have been living off of coal mining are going to end up migrating out of China and into other places. But I expect the renewables mining is going to continue in China, just kind of slightly more regulated.
Yeah. Omer, you want to add anything?
I agree with what Haseeb said, and I think generally, like, the pragmatism of the Chinese government and the people is that they want to wait and see it. So China itself is actually almost like a sandbox, regulatory sandbox in some ways. And but it's not, it's a little bit opaque, difficult to navigate. And I told you a lot of this comes from feeling. So once something hits the boundaries of that, things crack down. So guess what? You're using too much energy, and that's a serious national concern, that's a problem. 2, environmental. So they might distinguish between renewable and non-renewable. We'll see. I believe they will, like Asif said. Number 3, a lot of money has been going in from institutional guys into Bitcoin mining. That's hitting the wall too. And so as these things hit the wall, you're going to see like that sandbox, like notices come out. But generally, China loves technology. The government loves technology. And that's important for the growth of China.
Okay, Alex, you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement with both Haseeb and Omar, but I will point out something we didn't talk about also, which is the mining machine manufacturers, MicroBT and Bitmain in particular. They've already moved out of China, maybe certainly not entirely, but and I don't have I'm mixing them up. I was just trying to quickly look. I can't recall. I believe Bitmain has a manufacturing facility now in Malaysia, if I recall correctly. But they've diversified a bit already outside of mainland China. And it'll be really interesting to see in the near term if we have significant secondary supply of existing machines come online. You know, as a miner, Jason, I'm sure you're very aware with the bottleneck that we're seeing from for new machines. It'll really change that dynamic in the near term, and these machines are lasting longer than ever. I mean, there's still a lot of S9s on the network. And so I think that's another dynamic to pay attention to. And if these companies, particularly Bitmain and MicroBT, which are probably the two most important, are well diversified outside of China, I think they'll be much less affected. But one thing I did notice was that the way MicroBT was pricing their machines, they could be really, really hurt, MicroBT, by a large amount of secondary supply coming online. They had been demanding sort of like variable costs for their machines, and if could be really hurt if a bunch of cheaper supply becomes available. And I think we're going to see some. I mean, it's really hard to know. It's still too early. But keep an eye on those companies. Obviously, Bitmain has other affiliates, right? You've got Matrix Port and sort of these other sort of affiliated trading companies too to pay attention to. I think they're in great shape. As far as I can tell, they're more diversified outside mainland China as ever before.
Interesting. Jason, I'll let you. Did you say you had another question?
Yeah, I mean, it's great having these guys on because they clearly really know their stuff. So I'd love to sit here all day and ask lots of questions, but I'm not allowed to. I'll tell you what, pass on to someone else and let me just grab my favorite one for later, if that's okay, Lou.
Okay, great. So let's see. Next, we've got Gerald. Voted? Gerald
Bata.
Gerald Bata.
But by the way, full disclosure, and I don't, I'm glad you didn't ask me to comment on Jason's question, because I don't feel qualified to answer Jason. He's our Bitcoin analyst at Quantum Economics, so certainly knows more about it than myself. And Gerald is our director of communications, if he can get his communications online.
Gerald, did you want to say something?
Yes. Good afternoon or morning, wherever you are in the world. Well, yeah, I think China is being, I don't know what their game is here, but if you saw that statement on CCTV from the analyst saying we're all going to die, it's kind of ludicrous. So, I mean, I'm kind of on the edge of thinking that it's borderline propaganda, because they've done this before. We hate Bitcoin, and then there's ads on their, in China for Bitcoin, on the side of buildings and stuff. So, I don't know what their end game is. I do know that they are looking towards Bougainville. If you're not familiar with Bougainville, it's a little island in the South Pacific. It has one of the biggest gold reserves, untouched gold reserves in the world. And they have their eyes and have been drooling all over that island for many years now. So they definitely are fascinated with gold still. I think that's a part of their game. I'm not 100% sure if they've acquired the rights to Bougainville yet, but I know that they are trying to do that. So there's something to play at gold at some level here with China. I don't know what it is. But when we look at the miners, though, when it comes down to mining and Bitcoin specifically, though, we can see that the S9s have sold out. So everyone's saying that they're coming and cracking down on mining, and then they're sold out of Bitmain, sold out of the new S9 ant miners. There's something that doesn't add up to me when I'm looking at things. I did point out the other day that I did notice that the hash power is kind of stabilizing, and I noticed that the block times were going up to 20 minutes. So I said that this might actually stem some of the bleeding that we're seeing in the markets. So again, I don't know what China's end game is, but I think they dropped the ball, and I think the West needs to pick it up, and the Federal Reserve needs to start buying some ant miners and start learning how to mine. That's my opinion.
I wouldn't hold your breath, Gerald, but thanks for the comments.
That's for the next cycle.
Maybe I can, Lou, maybe I can just comment on that. Like a few things that I would just say to analyze this stuff. I wouldn't like weigh too heavily on Western media and the news you get, because like typically they know one or two parts of a 9-layer story, and it's hard to like really analyze this, know what's going on from overseas. That's one. Number two, like Chinese government and propaganda just traditionally always exercises something called yenda, which is like hard strikes. So they go out, scare everybody, and then after that, not too much happens after. Like if that saying like kill the chicken to scare the monkeys, like a couple of chickens have been killed, and then everybody behaves after that, and then you can go and kind of do what you were doing before. So that's happening here, and that always happens, no matter if it's Bitcoin or something else. So I would like put that in. I would put that frame.
That's one thing I noticed also, because they came out big and scary and started yelling, but I don't think anybody disappeared. Actually, they haven't disappeared anybody. That nobody really has crossed the line.
Yeah, we haven't heard anything of.
Sorry, go ahead, Alex.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to add to your point, Maddie. I haven't heard of any doors being kicked down or things like that yet, or at all. Right? I shouldn't even say yet.
I talked to one of the big 3 miners yesterday, and they were scared when it came out, and now they're pretty relaxed. There's going to be a dialogue, and there's going to be changes, but like we're going to flow into it, and people will still mine, and sometimes it might even be underground. Like that's a possibility too. But I think that distinction that that renewable versus fossil fuels that we talked about is going to be one of the main delineations. So look for proof of stake to be much more popular in China. That's one of the things that I think will be a part of this trend. You got to look, in China, we have a saying called wei ji, which is like when there's risk, there's opportunity. There's huge opportunity here. Like things will change, and there's big opportunity as well from something like that.
Yeah, another thing I would add to that, Omar, is so we actually, there at the time that the announcement came out, there was this big mining conference in Xinjiang where a bunch of the miners got together, and they're basically just partying when this announcement came out. And what I heard is that the party just immediately stopped, and everybody started calling up, their brokers essentially and panic selling, because nobody had any idea what was going on, and there was no communication with any of the miners about this. So there was a lot of panic in the moment that this announcement came out. And like you said, people have calmed down now that they're kind of back home, and they can kind of get a sense of what's going on locally. They're like, okay, maybe we overreacted to some degree. That being said, one thing I strongly caution against is trying to think about China as like a monolithic actor that has a single mind and is doing a single thing. It's very easy, especially in the West. We love ascribing to China as though it has like one brain and it's playing 11-dimensional chess with us, and everything that it's doing has like this big strategic component. In reality, just like with our government, Chinese government has a bunch of different interests, a bunch of different parties, a bunch of different groups, and they're all, they have their own reasons why things look complicated and messy. And a lot of the reason is not, it's them trying to play mind games with us, or that they have some big master plan in all this. No, it's just somebody decided, hey, this has gone too far, we're going to do this. Then locally people are like, oh shit, but we got all this tax revenue, what do we do? And then it's a complicated system that's resulting in these headlines that we're seeing. And so I would caution against imputing too much order behind all the chaos.
True. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think we have time for one more question, if we answer it quickly. And it comes from John McGreary. John, got to unmute yourself. You got your question? There you go. John, you're still muted?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so with China holding that much mining power, is there anything nefarious that could come out of that with such consolidation and centralization of it?
I mean,
Do you hold any XRP, sir?
Not sure.
I hope you don't. It's a good question. I'll take this one. In general, like we know let's accept Cambridge's number from a year ago on calling it 65% of Bitcoin's hash rate there in China. We haven't seen any ability of Chinese miners to do anything. Maybe we haven't seen any desire. There hasn't been widespread censoring of transactions. They haven't tried to 51% or double spend, right? I mean, we watch for that. A lot of people watch for that. In fact, forkmonitor.io, which is BitMEX Research's website for this, is one of the best resources for watching for things like double spends. But we also know that miners can't do much, even if they wanted to, right? Even a 51% attack is wildly overhyped as something that can't take coins from you. It can't steal your coins. For the most part, it can't roll back the chain except for from a point in time today going shortly into the future. And they can't force an upgrade, right? I mean, again, I made this point before. Bitcoiners pretty well made that clear that nodes have a lot more power than miners thought they had in 2017. So I only see the hash rate becoming more dispersed. To me, it's more about getting mining machines in a greater diversity of jurisdictions, right? Legal jurisdictions. So that if China was going to come and kick down doors at every single miner, if they said, you know what, all of a sudden, local economies or whatever benefits, power balancing, electricity balancing, and syncing up wasted energy that Bitcoin miners do, which we know is positive, all of that be damned. We're going to send SWAT teams to every known Bitcoin mining thing, turn it all off at once. That's a bigger risk than I think any kind of hash rate centralization or collusion. And we're not seeing that, to be clear, not seeing that. But it becomes much more difficult, right? If hash rate is more distributed. So I think we're going to see it become less centralized. But even today, I mean, we know Bitcoin miners can't do much. They don't control Bitcoin already. And so I don't think it's a big fear.
Okay, well, thanks for that thoughtful answer. We're coming to the top of the hour. So I'm going to ask one more quick question. Just give me one sentence, and this will be to the degree that we have any bumpers for this. But if there's one thing in one sentence that you'd like people to know about your opinion about what's going on in China, what would you like that sentence to be? And we'll start with you, Omer.
I think definitely the government's taking much more focus on Bitcoin, but in the long term, it's business as usual.
Okay, thanks, Omer. Alex?
Sorry, I got an urgent message. Repeat the question, Lou, real quick.
The question is just one sentence. What's the one thing that you would like people to know about your opinion about what's going on?
Oh yeah, that we're long-term bullish on Bitcoin. That I think this is a lot better for Bitcoin than a lot of people think. Okay,
terrific. And Haseeb, you get the last word.
I'd say what's happened so far is no big deal, but keep in mind when the government's paying attention to you, it's a good reason to be nervous if you're in China.
Okay, well, terrific. That sounds like good advice. So thanks a lot, Omer, Alex, Haseeb, Maddie, for the time. I thought it was a great call. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Have a great day. See you in Miami.
See you in Miami.